All right, now we're ready to go. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today. We have another Viaka Roundtable to discuss go-to-market and product market fit, two of probably the most important acronyms when it comes to startups, GTM and PMF. My name is Hani Azam, and we're going to get the panel started very shortly. I just want to briefly introduce Viaka and thank today's sponsor. For those of you not familiar with Viaka yet, today we are a global platform drawing founders, investors, and professionals from all over the world who share ties to the Middle East and North Africa. And our work is really centered on three main pillars. Viaka Connect is our community. We have roughly 3,000 people in our orbit who attend our events, tune into events like these, and receive our monthly newsletter. We also have 7 global hubs. We're in the process of launching formal city chapters this year. We've already been in New York, San Francisco, Boston, London, and Toronto in 2025, and we've got more stops planned for the second half of the year. Viaka Consult is the arm of our platform that we use to organize a lot of the really experienced professionals and freelancers and mentors and service providers that we have in our community to execute on high quality programs for accelerators, governments, and sometimes we work directly with startups or investors as well. And finally, Viaka Capital serves to connect the founders and investors that are in our orbit. Central to this are demo days that we host a few times a year, as well as the Angel Syndicate that we launched in 2025 earlier this year. We've made one investment as a syndicate thus far, and we're actually closing on our second one right now. So if you're interested in any of this, please feel free to get in touch. You can, very simply just shoot me an email, hani@viaka.net. I'll also send a follow-up to this session. So with that, I want to bring us to today's event. And before handing things over to Javed and the panel, I do want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Invictus Direct. Rami and Faris are on the call today, and I had the pleasure of meeting Rami in Toronto last week. So super excited to have them involved. Invictus Direct is a boutique global recruitment firm that delivers precision headhunting across North America and the Middle East and North Africa. They specialize in connecting high growth startups and scale ups with top tier talent across a ton of fields, including tech and IT, sales, customer support, finance, accounting, engineering, construction, and healthcare. And they really leverage their ties both in North America as well as the region, and offer a great service to MENA-based firms in particular that are scaling globally because they have such unique access to a large pool of specialized talent in the region and globally. They're really set up to be founder friendly. They charge no upfront fees, no exclusivity agreements, and provide a 90-day guarantee on every hire. So Invictus Direct, Rami, Faris, thank you guys so much for your support today. I know you were also going to drop some information into the chat for folks to get in touch, and we'll also include your contact information in our follow-up. So with that, we've got a really great discussion. Javed Maqsood is going to be moderating today's conversation, and we have 2 founders and an investor on the panel with him, Hashem Abdou from Oasys Health, which is the first portfolio company of the Viaka Syndicate. So we're super honored to have him involved with us in so many different ways. Yasmin from Amilis, who has been a really active member of our chapter out in London, and Omar Sati from Dash Ventures, who's been really a great supporter of Viaka pretty much since day one. So we're really, really excited to have you all and to learn from you. I guess with that, I'll turn things over to you, Javed, to get us started.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Hani and Invictus Direct. So I'm going to jump right in, start sharing my screen, and let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
So super excited to host this session and run this session with this esteemed panelist today. Um, I chose a topic working with Hani and Reem to something that is very near and dear to me that I work towards all the time. And that's about product market fit and go to market. We are going to go through the startup journey phases, what product market fit is, and how to measure, and go to market towards product market fit. So I'm going to spend about 5 to 7 minutes talking about this and quickly jump into the panel discussion. So, quick background about me. Um, I'm based in Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. And I've worked in a bunch of different companies in the past. You'll see those logos in the on the left. Right now, connected with Viaka and Global Consulting and Accelerator and VC Network through the likes of Plug and Play, through Dash Ventures, through many other organizations out there. I love working with startups that are in startup phase as well as scale up phase, and I work towards helping them get to the next stage of their growth. And looking forward to this discussion moving forward. Panelists today, Yasmin, as Hani mentioned, based in London. Amilis, where she is building digital health tools to close the gender health data gap and address the underrepresentation of women in medical research. I'll let her also do a quick intro later on, but she is very hands-on in launching and validating MVPs, and she has a product background. Hashem, New York-based, Oasys, very diverse background, very colorful background, comes from Cairo, Egypt. With a background in research and a psychologist mother, the idea for Oasys began while he was developing a microfluids wearable to detect cortisol in sweat. And that's really where the genesis of Oasys is. I'll let you read the rest. Omar, he and I, we've known each other for a couple of years now, so I'm really glad to have him here as part of our panel discussion. He's out of Jordan and Toronto, and he is one of the partners at Dash Ventures, and he will bring a lot of diverse background and discussion into our panel today. So let's quickly jump in and talk a little bit about product market fit, how I see it, and why I picked this topic. When a startup is forming off and when a startup is going towards a journey towards market validation, recognition, and scale, the first, uh, Annie, can you check and see where the noise is coming from? Perhaps mute people. Yeah, thank you. So the first step that we really focus on as growth strategists and startup founders are product market fit. So I'm going to talk a bit about that and what my views are towards a product market fit for a business. So this is something that every startup goes through, idea to vision to research and MVP to traction. So startup founders have an idea, they come up with a vision, they start to do the research. And validate the concept that, hey, there's a need out there for this vision and idea in the market, and I'm solving a problem, that customer solution fit. Once that's done, building the MVP prototype, etc., and starting to get traction. Along the way, these are some important steps for the startup founders to think about. The main thing that I'm going to add here is, besides prototype, startup founders also start to think about incubation period, design partnership period as really early validation stages. And if we jump forward, then we get into the phase that I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes today, about market entry, go to market. Super important topic, because as startup founders start to grow the company and start to bring the company to the market, thinking about a cohesive market entry, go to market strategy is super important. that startup founders really need to start thinking about and bringing together all the different aspects of that early stage go-to-market. Now, winning the segment V0 of customers towards market validation. The segment V0, the way I define it, is building an ICP, ideal customer profile, of very limited hand-picked customers or consumers that you want to win as validation point for your business, and being super selective about these early stage adopters who really fit well for the use case and the problem that you're trying to solve. So once you've won that segment V0 of customers, then um, you start to get the first signs of market validation. Have I won the first segment of customers? Do I have ROI and value delivered through these early segment of customers? Have I achieved some level of CSAT? Are they giving us indications about the fact that they're starting to like and use my product out there? I've seen some founders go to great lengths in staying in close touch with their early stage customers to validate this. Voice of the customer is positive. Once you've achieved that market validation, you start to journey towards the product market fit. And then you start to create the scale version of the go-to-market towards scaling motions. So from there on, we're going to go towards a bit more around the key metrics that every startup founder should start to think about as far as what should be measured as part of your journey towards that market entry, go to market, and achieving product market fit. Setting up the right KPIs, measuring those right KPIs, and focusing on customer satisfaction and listening to the voice of customers. Those are important topics. Um, CSAT, customer feedback, user engagement, retention rates, revenue increase. These are some of the key metrics and KPIs that I advise founders to measure towards the journey all through the market entry, go to market. Next, let's quickly talk about how we do it. Market entry, go to market. So as you think about building a market entry, go to market, there's really 3 to 4 important aspects that you should start to think about. One is customer journey. And my philosophy is work backwards from outward in towards building a customer journey that you have envisioned for your early stage customers. And how would you build a customer journey? Thinking about the customer journey and the touch points, thinking about building something that would make your customers keep using your product or service on and on and on for some period of time. Different ways of building it. On the right side, you'll see a sample that typically startups use to go build these customer journeys. Next one, marketing. The big message here is that the key component is getting the message out for your business or the tech product that you're building in front of the market. So how would you go about doing that and create that message out to the market? The earlier you start on this phase, the better it is for you. There's some notes there like product pitch. Well, who is the face of the company? What kind of brand and positioning do you want to put out there in order to really amplify your voice? What is your content posting strategy? It's even more important now than a year ago with proliferation of content that's out there, especially fueled by generative AI. Engagements and impressions, how do you measure it? How do you improve it? What are some of the channels that you want to grow your business in? Super important. Startup founders should be using the network, should be using the referral, should be using channels if that's part of your early stage launch strategy. But I see a lot of founders become successful utilizing their network and the referral um, mechanism in order to get the voice and the message out. The next one is sales, founder-led sales, really important. Um, what channel are you going to use? Are you going to sell in what motion? Enterprise or D2C or PLG or SLG, sales-led growth or community-led growth? These are all important topics for you to start to think about. But whatever you choose from the sales side, make sure that you align your marketing activities accordingly to really support the lead gen and the funnel that's coming in. I've added some of the early stage sales cycle stages at the bottom. And what are some of the metrics that you should be measuring as you start to win the segment V0 of your customers? Lastly, reach product market fit. So this is one of my favorite topics and my favorite slides. I advise folks to make product market fit measurement quantitative versus qualitative and start thinking about what is your customer success leading indicator. If you're thinking about customers, early stage customers using your product ahead of time, then it becomes easier for you to measure it in a true mathematical way, true quantitative way. So, for example, if real example from Slack and early days, if 70% of my customers who have signed up for Slack sends X number of team messages in the first X number of Y number of days, then I think that I'm starting to reach product market fit. So those are actual numbers and metrics. Happy to dive into this more with the folks if they have questions, interest on this. But I'm going to open up the panel discussion now, um, and start to have some of the panelists chime in and give their quick background. So I'll leave this on, but I will ask our panelist, Omar, why don't you maybe do a quick intro of yourself, and then I'll go to the other panelists.
Thanks, Javed. I'm Omar Sati. I'm managing partner at Dash Ventures. Set up Dash in the MENA in late 2011. I've been investing, but I've been doing this for 2 years before, so 15 years of MENA venture capital investment. So I've really seen the region and the ecosystem really evolve from where it was back in those days, where there was the catalyst of Yahoo acquiring Maktub to where we are today and all the acquisitions in between, and really how things are growing, various ecosystems, various parts of the MENA. The MENA is huge, and I've had the opportunity to work with so many folks, investors, founders, other stakeholders in various ecosystems. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm not going to go into too much detail about Dash. Everything's on the website. I'm very happy to be here. I love the Viaka community. I've seen a whole bunch of familiar names popping up. I'm not going to be able to talk to everybody, but anybody that I know that's here, lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Omar. Hashem?
Yeah, thanks, Javed. Hi, everyone. I'm Hashem. It's great to be here. Honestly, it's an honor to be with these rest of these panelists and just part of this discussion. I think just a quick bit about me. So I was born and raised in Cairo, Egypt. Moved to the US in 2019 for college. So I studied biomedical engineering and computer science at Harvard. I've always been very interested in startups and in healthcare. For a while, wanted to pursue medicine actually, and then decided I was more interested in the tech and in the engineering side of it, but had a couple of startup experiences here and there. I started a company in high school, and graduated last year from my undergrad, and then just started Oasys right out of college. So I have two other co-founders. Oasys, I think, as Javed mentioned earlier in the quick intro, came from my thesis originally, which was building hardware and a wearable for cortisol detection as a proxy for stress. And the idea was, can we combine physiological biomarkers with context to get a better understanding of mental health? And my mom's a clinical psychologist, so I grew up close to the space, but also grew up in Egypt where mental health is not well understood. It's quite stigmatized, it's quite taboo. And so I'm really interested in the question of how can we make more sense of it, maybe using data. And so the big vision of Oasys and where we're going with this is how can we make it more accessible by introducing data layers and combining different sources of data to train models that can help us understand mental health better. So I'm sure we'll get to dive deeper, but that's a bit about me.
Thank you, Hashem. Yasmin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Yasmin. Super lovely to be here. Thank you, Javed, Hani, everybody for having me. A little bit about me. I'm Lebanese Irish. I grew up in the UAE, a little bit in Lebanon, and then the rest of my time here in the UK from the age of 15. I studied electrical engineering, probably because I was so frustrated with the electricity problems in Lebanon. In my brain, I thought I was gonna like solve everything, to be honest with you. So that's really where that came from. But then during my degree and during my master's, I, discovered machine learning and was super interested in what's going on there. So became more specialized within machine learning. I found myself actually very randomly working in startups. So I did have some internships in corporate, which were great. And then I had my thesis for 6 months in a startup, which was super fun. And then I couldn't go back after that. I think for me, the startups are the way. And during that internship as well was the first time that I was exposed to product. I had never heard of what product is. I didn't know what like a product manager role was. It wasn't something that we were really educated about in university. I think maybe now it's a bit more well known, but back then a little bit less. And then yeah, straight out of university, I started in an early health tech company where I was number 3 on the team to a solo founder and had the most amazing experience, building MVPs, launching products, totally failing, doing it all again, hiring a tech team from scratch. So it was really like my playground before I started Amilis about 3 years ago. I'm super passionate about how we can use healthcare data to fuel, drug discovery and patient journeys and pathways and outcomes. And that's really the foundation of Amilis. I've always had like a lot of problems with my reproductive health. It's something that's really close to me. So I thought, let's do something about it. And that's really where Amilis was born. And today, from a product perspective, we have a marketplace for women where they can find specialists across reproductive health and fertility. And then we also have some products in stealth, which I can't tell you too much about, that we're launching with doctors directly. And yeah, really my expertise is building platforms that connect clinicians, patients, and that's fueled by data and machine learning.
Great. Thank you, Yasmin. And you're currently in Spain somewhere.
Actually, I'm back in London now. Yeah, I was just in
You're back
Spain
in
for the
London.
last 2 weeks escaping.
Great.
But I'm back. I'm
Let's
back.
so let's jump into our questions. So the first question that I'm going to start off with is I'm going to ask Hashem to jump in. How should startups think about measuring product market fit for their product? And when do you think about scale?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's funny because we're definitely still on that journey. I think product market fit is less of a binary, it flips the switch all of a sudden. It's more of a journey. Um, there's the classic like Paul Graham kind of YC mantra, which is build things that don't scale. And I think that's probably our philosophy towards, finding product market fit. I think that's the initial step. Um, so I think, when it comes to product market fit, it's important that you really dive deep. It's important that you build things that don't scale quite literally because, you want to get messy. You want to talk to your early customers very, very closely. You almost have to have that maniacal obsession with your early customers. And I think that's really how you kind of start with this high touch, very, very intense kind of deep dive. And then I think over time, the outcome of that, unscalable process is ultimately product market fit. I think it's something that you start to see over time when you start getting maybe inbound interest, when you start getting people who are spreading the word naturally, and you start hearing about success stories from your early customers. But I think the first, I would say, step is trying to really dive deep and dig deep and ultimately, it's kind of an iterative process until you reach a point where you start seeing that external validation from your
Yeah,
customers.
market validation. Yeah. Yasmin?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's certain KPIs that you try to define. And in the beginning you kind of like make things up and hope that those are your KPIs. And Javed, actually, when you showed your slides of, Slack's phrase that they use, it makes me kind of laugh because I think we would have never thought of our phrase until it kind of came to life. And I think one of my favorite definitions of product market fit is when you stop pushing your products onto people and you're starting to be pulled. And for us, like just an example, we launched one of our products to the doctors that we're working with. Very quickly, they were showing all of their friends at the clinic and kind of passing it around and kind of building that excitement organically to a point where one week we were just getting so many WhatsApp messages on our business WhatsApp, getting chased by doctors from other countries. And so we just suddenly found like we were super overloaded with the interest initially. And that's obviously like a great feeling, but it's something that we didn't expect. But then that initial excitement led into certain product features that we defined, the numbers that we defined that we felt, would be the next goal to hit product market fit. So it definitely was that early excitement for us.
Yeah, my commentary on that super cool example, my commentary on that is the leading indicator of retention, as far as that feeling, that pull, that's important for everyone to keep in mind. What is the leading indicator of retention? And then customers wanting that product. And the last piece that you also touched on is what is one of my favorite topic that I talk about is word of mouth / virality. So depending on who you're selling to, that word of mouth across the business, etc., is one, but virality, as people are starting to talk about it across the community and customers wanting to come to you, that's super important. And there are some companies out there right now that are in hypergrowth phase that are solely using virality to grow. Companies like some people have heard of Lovable, building websites super easily, right? So those are some examples of product market fit. Omar, your commentary on this?
Yeah, look, I think both Yasmin and Hashem and yourself covered the majority of it, and I agree. Particularly, the way I put it is mostly is when sales or interest starts becoming inbound as opposed to outbound. At least for SaaS companies, that's how they measure it, right? When you start getting more inbound attention wanting your product, that is absolutely an indication. But then you need to look at, okay, how sustainable is it? Because there is, um, uh, I don't want to say, just for lack of a better word, fake product market fit, right? Where you think you have product market fit just because something is viral, but then all of a sudden 3 months later nobody's using your product anymore. Um, I love something. So there's a founder uh, who I really admire and I follow. Like every he's interviewed, I watch it over and over. It's Raul Vora of Superhuman. The way he thinks about everything, the way he has a very scientific mind and he's very data driven. And one of the things that he does always is he always asks us, first of all, I completely agree with at the beginning, talking to customers. You have to do that at the seed level when you're looking. People are like, oh really, how can you do that? That's not scalable. We understand that's not scalable, but this is the part of the PMF journey. And once we figure it out, founders know that this is not scalable and that they're going to have to find other solutions to this. But I admire and respect. We're actually talking to a founder now who has about 300 to 500 customers. He calls every person that bought something off of their website, calls them up and says, what did you like? What did you not like? And he has that conversation with them. That's very important because these tweaks will lead to PMF. But going back to Raul very quickly, is he asks all his customers, how would you feel if the product is no longer available? And then you're ranking from 1 to 5, not really disappointed or extremely disappointed. And when you start getting a lot of your customers saying, if you take this product away from me, I will be extremely disappointed. That's key of product market fit. It means that there are no alternatives out there that they would like to go to because all the alternatives are crap and rubbish compared to this one. This is really genuinely solving an authentic problem. So I think you have to look at metrics, but you also have to figure out, is this authentic PMF or is this virality? Again, I still can't find the right word, so I'm still going to stick to fake PMF until the right word comes to my mind. But non-authentic PMF, where 3-4 months down the road, you think you had it and it's not there anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to close that with a couple of examples of Superhuman. The product itself, I also closely follow the founder that you mentioned, Omar. I've listened to a bunch of his podcasts, and he's very simple, straight shooting, very thought-oriented speaker. And I started listening to him when I was piloting Superhuman. And a couple of the things that I learned is that he went after the market of a very simple tagline. I'm going to replace Gmail, G Suite. And it's a big challenge to take. And he plugged away at it with a very simple easy to use user interface, and he really focused on that US simplicity and the features. And he started to use a lot of different techniques towards product market fit. And a big one that he followed, that he did, is gaming, introducing gaming in during your onboarding cycle. And I would start to get gaming emails from him all the time when I started using it. So find out your little trick that allows you to start to get to that stage where people like us, he doesn't know us, we don't know him, but we're talking about his product, and that's virality. All right, moving on to the next question. I'll start with you, Omar. How do you decide on your first channel? No, I'm going to start with you, Omar, with this question rather. Founder market fit, how do you know that this is a top validation point for a VC? Did you know that this is a top validation point for a VC? And, this question, as far as founder market fit, from you, Omar, and then us founders, it would be a good, fun discussion to have. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So look, I mean, VCs are always talking about, or investors always talk about, we invest in teams. What does that mean? What makes a good team versus a bad team? We invest in operators. They give you these traits. We want someone who's resilient, tenacious, obsessed, all that sort of stuff. What we look at, we have a tendency at Dash where we sort of lean towards, and I'm not saying this is not necessarily, there's no right or wrong. We just lean and prefer founders that are solving a problem that they've experienced and they understand, and it's within a market that they have knowledge in, and it's domain expertise. I think that's important because then the founders and the team are sort of mission driven or purpose driven to solve a problem, and it's not just an opportunity. It's not just a financial opportunity. And founder market fit is essentially, that also distinguishes. When you make an investment, you're not going to be making that one unique investment. There are always competitors. I will never believe any slide that says nobody's doing this. In fact, they should always have a slide that says everybody. There's so many people that are doing the same thing. Maybe it's a different model, different to market, different pricing strategy, but concepts are generally the same. And teams will distinguish that. And the key to that, the team is going to find the right model, the right go-to-market, the right strategy to actually get to product market fit and to scale. So that's what we mean by founder market fit. Not just are they skilled, are they smart, do we have chemistry with them, but do they check all the boxes? Do they have domain expertise, industry know-how? Do they have a vast network? Have they done this before? All those sort of things fit in within our assessment of founder market fit. And I think it goes a long way. Like I think our founder market fit is very important when we're assessing any opportunity.
Thank you. Yasmin, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously from my perspective, I'm the founder, right? In this case. So, obviously for me, it's just been innate. I couldn't imagine founding a company that I wasn't extremely linked to and passionate about, and driven. I can't even imagine what it's like for early stage VCs, where you kind of have to take quite a big bet based off of an idea. When I look at our pitch deck from 3 years ago when we first raised, it's not our overarching vision and what we're doing and the mission we're on hasn't changed, but the product has completely changed. Our assumptions have changed. Our revenue model has changed. And so for me, I think, being a founder that is extremely data driven, not getting stuck in your tunnel vision, not being too dispersed. And I always argue, maybe this gets backlash, but I always argue that having a co-founder that is a product person is, I think, one of the best setups, because I've been the technical person as well, but I think what I've learned in product and iterating and validating before building, and I've made a lot of mistakes in the past where we invested heavily in engineering work, and then actually we didn't validate that before we did that. I would say like having those product principles and iteration is one of the most important things when you're starting a company. So whether that's the founders or the first hires, I think it's a a huge thing in when you're getting started, especially if you're a first time founders.
First time founder. Okay. Hashem, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really
First time founder, your perspective.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. I mean, one thing I want to touch on is Omar's point about domain expertise, because I think that's a really interesting one. I think often people think, and again, maybe I'm also a little bit biased like Yasmin, but I mean, I think people often think of domain expertise as, you have to have all these credentials and you have to have been in the space for a while and you have to have this and that. I think what matters much more than that is a genuine interest and almost like sometimes irrational conviction in what you're doing and in the industry that you're in. Um, I think early stage investors, and Omar, I'm sure you know this better than anyone, but they can see through, founders who are just hopping on a trend and trying to be in an industry that's, sexy or trending now or whatever that is. But I think that if you identify the problem space broadly that you're really interested in and you have an idea of where the space is going, ultimately the product that you build on day one is almost never the product that you end up having, whether it's when you reach product market fit or when you launch or when you scale or whatever it is. So I think the most important thing, at least for me and for when I think about me and my co-founders with our early team, is you really need to believe in the direction that the industry is headed and being aligned with that kind of direction and have just a real genuine interest and conviction in what you're building and in the space in general. Because I think often this idea of domain expertise doesn't always apply to, early stage or early young founders or founders that are, first time right out of college, for example. None of us, for example, on the team are clinical. We all come from more of a tech background. But I think it is as important to just be curious and be willing to, get your hands dirty and talk to people and learn and be excited about the space, more so than coming in with, and I'm not saying that's what you meant, but more so than coming in with, a packed resume or a bunch of letters, after your name. So
Yeah.
That's definitely not what I meant by domain expertise.
Of course,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't think, CMA, PhD, CFA, that's not that, if you have all of those credentials, you've probably been spending decades getting those credentials, and you're very difficult for you to transition into an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur and a founder doesn't really care about those credentials. They want to build, they want to get out there. I think what I mean by domain expertise is not necessarily it's experience and it's understanding who you're building for. And I think there is some level of expertise needed, and it might not need to be the founders per se, but like when you're in healthcare, when you're in finance, like health tech, fintech, biotech, I mean, there are certain industries where you kind of need to understand that. Like, let me give you an example. I mean, we have a company of ours that's in logistics. It's not like the guy has a PhD in logistics and was, the guy just happened to work with Kareem. So when you're working with Kareem, you sort of understand, the problems with, solving certain problems within the logistics industry and mobility. So he learned something from that experience and decided to start his next company. To me, that's domain expertise, because you're coming from something, you experienced that problem, you saw it firsthand, and you're like, you know what, I want to solve that. So there's that element. But then there's the element which I love as well. It's somebody that's solving a problem because they experienced an issue and a problem, and then they're like, I want to go out and fix it. That itch of like, this is unacceptable because I've experienced, or this is unacceptable because I've witnessed it and I've observed it. Those are just the two forms of, let's say, purpose-driven founders that we prefer to lean towards.
Very good. Makes sense. I'll just finish that with my own thoughts and commentary. I see a lot of different founders with very different diverse background, and I'll categorize it in three buckets. All of them, and I advise a lot of the founders on how to go in front of a VC towards positioning themselves in their pitch decks, and I send some of these pitch decks even to folks like Omar and Abdou, his partner at Dash. the partners come, I mean, the founders come in with some sort of passion, background, knowledge about the problem that they're trying to solve. It could be connected to their personal life. It could be connected to like being at Kareem, etc. That's super important. One of the founders that I know of is solving a problem in um, epilepsy and why epilepsies happen and how to reduce the threat of epilepsy. He experienced that growing up with his sister being epileptic. Right. Now that's domain expertise. I know of another founder who has spent 20 years in fintech and he knows everything about that industry and he's building a solution in the fintech infrastructure. So those are early stage founders having that experience, having that personal passion, personal knowledge, but that's that itch, like Omar mentioned, has to be there for you to go out and be passionate about what you're building and going in front of VCs. Great. We have a few more questions, and then we're going to open it up for the attendance for some questions, Q&A at the end as well. I'm going to go with Yasmin on this question, and she brought it up earlier on. What is founder syndrome? And the
Yes.
tunnel founder that you started to talk about a bit ago.
I'm very passionate about founder syndrome. It's something that I always think about. Founder syndrome, if you haven't heard of it before, is essentially when a founder becomes very rigid on their vision of what they believe the company is going to do or what the product is going to be, you know? So, I mean, there's so many examples of this, right? But essentially, you probably have other team members that might be further into the data. You know, let's say if you do have some product hires or design hires that are doing a lot of design testing or getting out there in front of the customers, and it's being a founder that's not responsive to that data and is in a bit of in denial because you're so passionate and sure that that's the solution because that solution would work for you and you know you would use it yourself, for example, but maybe that's not what your market would use, or maybe you are just a niche user in your circle. So, and I think we're all guilty of this. We're all guilty of hyper focusing on an idea, maybe building it out a little bit too much in the hopes that it's going to work out. Before you realize, okay, I probably could have done that better. And I've done that a couple of times. I don't even know now how many MVPs, honestly, I've launched at this point, but now I'm getting really good at doing a very minimal thing. If it's a product, it's not an MVP. If it is a full-blown working product, it's not an MVP. You've kind of skipped like a lot of steps there. What can you build that can be hyper flexible, that you can A/B test, that you can, you know, break down, and you don't necessarily need to rely on a developer or too much resources to change it and really validate what you're building, and constantly get into the data of measuring the right things. So I think also when you launch something, you think you might be measuring the right things, but actually you realize you were randomly measuring this one metric that then gave you the most insights that then determined what the next step was. So I think it's always checking in as a founder of like, whoa, how many months have I been working on this actually? Before reviewing the data and maybe bringing in other brains as well to kind of help you get out of that tunnel vision, but also being very broad in the things that you're measuring because you don't really know what if you're measuring is the right sort of metrics. I can give you an example. So for example, I know we're going to talk a little bit about channels, but for us, we made big assumptions that, you know, most of our channels are going to come from our network, which they did definitely in the beginning, and then also through like social media. We found out just by measuring in a lot of detail and how people were finding us that it was Reddit. Reddit was bringing us a third of our customers because somebody mentioned us on Reddit. We had no idea. And now there's all these threads on Reddit talking about us, which is amazing. But we never invested in threads and Reddit and actually providing information about us. So that's something that just popped up that if we hadn't measured a little button on our website saying, how did you find us? Oh, forums like Reddit, we would have never discovered. So I think it's also about being open in your tracking as well. That can kind of switch what you might be hyper focusing on.
Very good. Hashem, your thoughts on that? And then I'll go to Omar.
Yeah, I think actually I have a follow-up question, Yasmin, and because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. But I mean, what you said at the beginning definitely resonates because I think especially when you as a small team and you're early and you spend weeks or months building something and it almost feels like your baby. Like it's really hard to then just abandon that, and it's super painful to let go of something that you've built and you're proud of, even when sometimes the data suggests that it might be not resonating in the market or people don't want what you're building, whatever it is. So definitely resonates. I would say though, and this is a question that I ask myself often, and we have internal discussions about this sometimes, but the antithesis is kind of like the Henry Ford. Like if I had asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? So
Mhm.
to some extent, like how do you balance that, founder syndrome issue with also, the whole visionary? Like sometimes it is important to, or is it, to just have conviction and build it and ignore all the noise around you from everyone else who might be trying to shut you down because you just see maybe something that others don't.
I think I probably annoy my team because at this point, whenever we have an idea or like an assumption, I'm like, prove it. Oh, you think they want that? Okay, why? Like, what have you gathered to make that decision, and why should we like invest resources in it? So whether that's just time or money or like a project. So I think I always do that to myself as well. Like I have a very clear idea of what the solution should be. But if I haven't gone through my process of validating it, and typically like what I do is similar to what Javed, showed, it's you identify a problem, you break down all your core assumptions, you might have assumptions on what those solutions are, and you've actually measured a lot of it before you've spent a penny on tech. And I think that's something I never did in the past. And that's where a lot of us getting into a lot of tech debt and things happen now. And I think it's about being super strict on yourself, that when you have an idea, it's like, what very quick experiment can I run? And then as you kind of have different experiments going on, it does naturally iterate into a thing. And you probably look back on your notes and you were right about what you thought would be the solution. But at least you took the time to say, I actually don't really know, what can I do to make sure that this is the case? And then also, how many people can I talk to about it to get me? Because people will, I mean, what's that book called?
Home test or something.
The Mom Test is such a good book
Mhm.
about how to ask questions, because it's true. Any person I go up to say, "This is my startup. What do you think?" They're like, "Yeah, it's amazing. Oh my God." But then you give it to them and then they won't use that feature. So I don't trust anybody. Only trust data.
Great. Omar.
Yeah, look, there was a lot said, so I don't know. I had thoughts that were talking, and then all of a sudden, so much was said. But look,
All right, I talk
I
fast.
I think yeah, there's a balance to everything. I mean, I'm sure there are, you know, founder syndrome is one of the reasons why many startups fail, just because the founder or the founding team was just unable, they were not agile enough, they were not listening, they were too obsessed with or in love with their product and their narrow thinking, that they weren't able to shift direction and iterate and pivot. You mentioned this at the beginning of the call. Listen, there's not a single company. I've been investing for 15 years. Not a single company that we invested in a company that was in stealth. This is only 2 years ago. We invested in a company in 2023. It was in stealth, launched out of stealth, realized, nope, this isn't it, went back into stealth, relaunched. And when it relaunched a second time, just within this 2 year period that we had already invested, that's when we started to see graphs that are looking like this. So that's when, okay, there are signals now that something is working. So look, investors have to accept the fact that founders are going to experiment, and founders have to accept the fact that this is an experiment and you have to move. You can still be obsessed about your concept and what you're solving. You just have to be able to move and change your product and even scrap your product and rebuild if you have to, and go back into stealth mode. In terms of, we talk about the mom test and asking questions. I read somewhere the other, I wish I can find it. I was either watching an interview or I read it somewhere that says how the human is wired innately to problem solve. And if you take that comment and you combine that with the way kids naturally, every single kid, regardless of where you are they're always asking why? Isn't this there's this test like ask why 8 times, and if you can answer why 8 times, you have the answer. When you combine those two together, it's about problem solving, and it's about asking questions. And I do think it's all in the data. We can always make assumptions. I think pattern recognition is important. I think instinct is important. We develop that with time, with experience. Some people have it innately, but I think it's just a combination of everything, right? There's just so much there, and this is why it's so difficult to build a startup and a successful one at that. It's because all of these elements, these dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of inputs, have to come together and they have to align for something to work. And you're looking at tangible and intangible. You're looking at data, and then you're looking at feelings and thoughts and traits and characteristics of the founding team. You got to bring that all together, and it's not easy. This is why a lot of it is serendipity, luck, timing. That also has to work in your favor for everything, for product market fit, for success, for everything. That's life.
Yeah, I'll do a quick commentary on this, and then I'm going to transition to Q&A phase. Quick commentary is something that Omar mentioned. I'll start with that, and then I'll go to the other panelists' comments. Pivoting, listening to what the market is telling you, pivoting. Many famous examples of that, if you go search for it. Slack didn't start off as Slack, it started off as something else. And a bunch of other companies. And listening to that market feedback, building outward in. That's super important for founders to something that Yasmin brought up, staying grounded, questioning everything, questioning those KPIs, listening to the customers and figuring out what the customers are saying about it. And doing that at early stage, but also setting those KPIs as you grow across your ecosystem. The other piece I'm going to add to this is surround yourself with folks who can get that feedback for you, because the biggest thing that I see in my job, in my day-to-day, founder syndrome, tunnel vision, is founders being super focused and passionate and being the father of what they're building, being the parent of what they're building, and staying true to that, but not listening to the outside perspective, the general macro perspective of how that applies to today's market. And you're super tunnel focused on building it. You're not seeing what else is going on out there. So just bring in that perspective through experts, through folks who are out there. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask the participants to ask us any questions towards the end.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my name is Hussein Abdou. You might recognize the last name, but my question was, I'm a rising freshman at college, and I'm very passionate about becoming an entrepreneur sometime in the future, or even now if I come up with a good idea. But given that we're being told that AI is taking over many jobs, what advice would you give someone like me when it comes to what I should study, what major I should choose, or what kind of experiences I should prioritize in college to build the right foundation for starting my own business?
Great. Do you have any panelists in mind for it, or open-ended?
I mean all of them, but I mean I could get different experiences from those who have already been in the field, from Omar, maybe an investor, early stage startups, late stage, anyone, honestly.
Okay. So for the sake of time, I'm going to have maybe Hashem answer this and then move on to the next question.
Actually, maybe Omar. Omar, why don't you take this one?
All right.
Look, I don't think there's an answer. I think. Look, I mean, I think about it because I have my son is 13 years old. He's going to be going to college soon. I see AI and what it's doing, and I'm like, what do I want my son? What do I want my son to do? And listen, if I'm going to give you advice here, I don't mess with people's careers, right? I'm not going to sit here telling you chase this and don't do this. That doesn't work that way, because I come from a background where I had my father tell me what he wanted me to do, and I went to college and I changed it because I found my own. So my advice to you is going to be, just if you're open-minded and you're always discovering and you're always talking to people, and just going back to what we're saying, you're just asking questions, just discover, man. If you're always discovering new things, you're going to find what you want to do. You're going to find your passion, whether it is following the entrepreneurial path. I don't think becoming an entrepreneur. I don't think entrepreneur is a title. I think you just are by nature of the path that you choose. And whatever happens, as long as it's something that you love and it's something that you're passionate about, and not because this is going to get you more money or this is going to help you do this or that. And that's really honestly the advice I would give my son. And is I taking jobs away? I don't think so, not yet. I mean, I think we're all using AI. Maybe in terms of generating content, it's those jobs. But I think you're in college. Whatever you do, my recommendation would be, I think specializing is what's going to differentiate you today, right? I think AI, in terms of taking over jobs and thinking like a human mind, I think we're still many years away. We're safe for now. I could be proven wrong, but I think the deeper you specialize, I think the jack of all trades that know a little bit of everything, those are the ones that are going to suffer. The deeper you understand and specializing and concentrating, that's going to help differentiate you. And again, just discover, and you'll find it, you'll know, and you'll figure it out.
And college is overrated anyway, so just go for it. No need for college.
Thank you.
All right, I think
listen,
we're at time.
I'm going to tell. I don't even remember what I learned in college. I think everything I learned in the 4 years of college, it was really like soft skills, dealing with people, becoming independent, becoming responsible. It was that stuff. But if you tell me, Omar, what did you take away from college? At least the first 2 years, I have to admit, nothing. I mean, you think I remember what I took in probability statistics class or Caribbean literature? I took a class in Caribbean literature, right? No, I mean, I did learn. I would say that the last 2 years were key. But generally it was more just me becoming an adult, I think, and going through the phases of becoming an adult. That's it.
I'm gonna echo what Omar said in closing, in the sense that what you're learning in college, those foundations are important. What's super important for you to learn now, and even more so, and do right now in college, is to build your network and connection and understand how that network is going to start to help you staying ahead of the AI and where AI is going. So if you had to focus on one thing, networking, communication, being in touch, being aware of what's going on in the world. Omar?
One more thing, just get out there, work, intern. That's how you're going to do it. And that's how you build the connections and everything. Even while you're in college, somebody, I want to intern with you. I want to work with you. That experience, on the ground, firsthand experience, that's how you're going to discover and find out. That's how you're going to learn. That's where the learning comes from. And that's where it actually sticks, because you're doing it. It's a habit and you're doing it every day. You're learning. That's what I would do. Always find time to intern remotely, virtually, whatever it is. Find people, run after them and say, I want to work with you, for you, learn from you. Find mentors. That's how you're going to get to where you want to go.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're at time. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. Thank you to all the panelists for their valuable insights, and look forward to keeping in touch with everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.